Imagine this. Airlines are begging Airbus to stretch the A220, turning it from a regional jet into a true narrow-body competitor. On paper, it sounds like a dream. More seats, more range, lower costs. But what if I told you this stretch could become a trap, not only for airlines, but even for Airbus itself? The A220 might look like the perfect jet to take on Boeing's 737, and even Airbus's own A320neo family. But hidden behind the numbers are risks that could backfire in ways nobody expects. Let's break down the full story. The Airbus A220 didn't actually begin life as an Airbus product. It was born as the Bombardier C Series, a bold Canadian project meant to reinvent the regional jet market. Bombardier took a huge gamble, designing a clean-sheet aircraft with brand-new Pratt and Whitney-geared turbofan engines, a modern carbon fiber fuselage, and a cockpit full of cutting-edge avionics. The result was a jet that could fly farther, burn less fuel, and offer passengers a wider, more comfortable cabin than any rival in its class. Airlines that tried it quickly fell in love. Swiss, Air Baltic, Delta, and others reported incredible efficiency numbers that left older Embraer and Boeing 737 classic jets in the dust. When Airbus took majority control of the program in 2018, rebranding it as the A220, everything changed. Airbus had the financial muscle, global support network, and marketing reach to push the aircraft to carriers worldwide. Suddenly, what looked like a risky experiment became a serious player in the single-aisle market. The jet was placed neatly below the A320 family, giving Airbus a product that could cover everything from 100 to 240 seats with just two families of airplanes. Airlines adore the A220 for very practical reasons. First, its fuel efficiency is unmatched in its category. A smaller airline can operate an A220 and save millions in fuel costs every year, which is critical as oil prices fluctuate and carbon regulations tighten. Second, the passenger experience is consistently praised. Wider seats, larger windows, quieter engines, and a smoother ride. In fact, many frequent flyers consider the A221 of the most comfortable narrow-body jets in the skies today. But perhaps the biggest reason airlines keep asking for more is range flexibility. The A220-300 already stretches to transcontinental flights in the US, and even some transatlantic routes. That's remarkable for a jet originally designed as a regional aircraft. And here lies the spark for the stretch conversation. Airlines see how well the current A220 performs, and can't help but imagine, what if Airbus simply extended the fuselage, added a few more seats, and pushed the jet into the 170 to 190 seat market? That's the territory of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 and the Airbus A320neo, a space worth hundreds of billions of dollars over the coming decades. For airlines, the logic seems simple. The A220 has already proven itself. Why not make it bigger? But as we'll see, stretching the jet is not as straightforward as it sounds, and it could create far more problems than it solves.
From the airline's perspective, the case for stretching the A220 looks almost irresistible. The aircraft has already built a reputation for low fuel burn, passenger comfort, and surprising range. Extending the fuselage to fit an additional 20 to 30 seats could open entirely new markets, making the jet a true competitor in the narrow-body category dominated by the Boeing 737 MAX 8 and the Airbus A320neo. For airlines constantly fighting thin profit margins, that potential is extremely attractive. One major incentive is fleet commonality. Carriers that already operate the A220 could use a stretched version to serve denser routes without having to jump to a completely different aircraft type. That saves on training costs for pilots and maintenance staff, while also reducing the complexity of managing spare parts. An A220 stretch could allow an airline to cover everything from 110-seat regional services to 180-seat trunk routes with just one family of jets. For smaller carriers, that kind of simplicity is a dream scenario. Another motivation comes from fuel economics. The A220 has been called one of the most fuel-efficient aircraft ever built, thanks to its geared turbofan engines and lightweight materials. Airlines hope that a stretched version would bring similar efficiency to a higher capacity market segment, lowering per-seat costs even further. In today's environment, where fuel accounts for up to 30% of an airline's expenses, even a 2 to 3% improvement in cost per seat can make or break profitability on a route. There's also the passenger experience factor. The A220's wider seats, larger windows, and quieter cabins stand out compared to older narrow bodies. Airlines know that customer loyalty often comes down to comfort. A stretched A220 could give carriers a marketing edge. Fly with us, and you'll get the best narrow-body ride in the sky. That's powerful when passengers are tired of being crammed into aging 737s or A320. Finally, airlines are eyeing the market gap. Boeing has struggled with delays and quality issues on the 737 MAX program, while Airbus is struggling to meet demand for the A320neo. Some carriers fear production slots for the A320 will be sold out for years. A stretched A220 could give them another option, one that might be available sooner and with lower operating costs. On paper, it all sounds like a win-win. Airlines get a cheaper, more efficient, and more comfortable alternative to the workhorses of the industry. But as with all things in aviation, what looks simple in theory often hides painful realities. And the trap becomes clear when we start examining the engineering, the costs, and the strategic risks for Airbus itself. Here's where the dream starts to unravel. Stretching an aircraft isn't as easy as adding a few extra rows of seats and calling it a day. The A220 was designed as a regional jet first, and while it performs brilliantly in its current forms, the A220-100 and A220-300, the airframe has limits. Extending it too far could expose weaknesses that Airbus and airlines may regret. The biggest issue is weight and balance. The A220's current wing and landing gear were optimized for smaller versions of the aircraft. Add 20 or 30 more seats, and suddenly the jet may need a stronger wing structure, beefed up landing gear, or even larger engines to handle the extra payload. That means more engineering, more testing, and ultimately, more cost. The result? A plane that might not actually be as efficient as airlines are hoping for. Then comes the performance challenge. The A220 is praised for its excellent short field capability and efficiency on long, thin routes. Stretching the fuselage could reduce that performance. A heavier, longer aircraft needs longer runways, consumes more fuel on shorter hops, and may lose some of the versatility that makes the A220 so attractive today. In trying to turn the A220 into a true 180-seat competitor, Airbus risks creating a jet that is neither the perfect regional aircraft nor a strong narrow-body rival. A kind of awkward middle child. There's also the strategic cannibalization problem. Airbus already has the A320neo, which sits squarely in the 150 to 200-seat category. If Airbus builds a stretched A220 that competes directly with its own A320neo, it could hurt sales of one of the company's most profitable programs. Why would Airbus risk undermining its own breadwinner? That's why insiders often call the idea of a stretched A220 a trap. It looks like growth, but it could split Airbus's single-aisle portfolio and confuse customers about which jet is the better long-term investment. Finally, we can't ignore development costs and risks. Airbus took over the A220 program from Bombardier partly because Bombardier couldn't handle the financial strain. Designing and certifying a stretched version would cost billions, at a time when Airbus is already struggling to ramp up A321 XLR production and defend against Boeing in the wide-body market. With tight supply chains and massive demand for existing A320neo orders, Airbus may decide that chasing the stretch is simply not worth the gamble. So while airlines see opportunity, Airbus sees risk. And history in aviation shows that not all stretches succeed. Some turn into costly mistakes that haunt manufacturers for decades.
Aviation history is full of examples that prove stretching an aircraft can be a dangerous gamble. Airlines may dream of squeezing in more passengers, but the engineering reality often tells a very different story. If Airbus seriously considers a longer A220, they need only look at the past to see the risks. Take the Douglas District of Columbia 8 as one of the earliest examples. In the late 1960s, Douglas stretched the DC-8 to compete with the Boeing 747 and other widebodies. The result was a plane that looked impressive on paper but demanded long runways and consumed huge amounts of fuel. Airlines discovered that it wasn't the flexible workhorse they needed, and sales collapsed once newer designs hit the market. Another example is the McDonnell Douglas District of Columbia 1030 stretch, an attempt to increase capacity without redesigning the jet from scratch. The stretch added weight and complexity but didn't solve the fuel efficiency problem. By the time airlines got it, the competition, namely the Boeing 767 and Airbus A320, was already delivering better economics. Even Boeing itself has fallen into the trap. Consider the Boeing 757-300. It was the longest narrow-body ever built, offering nearly 280 seats. But airlines soon realized it had limited appeal, too big for secondary routes, but lacking the range and economics of a true widebody. Only a handful were ever sold, and today, most 757-300s are retired early compared to their shorter siblings. On the regional side, Embraer tried something similar with its E-Jet program. The larger E195 was a stretch of the smaller E170, E190 family. While it did sell in decent numbers, airlines quickly hit the performance limits. The plane lacked the efficiency of smaller versions and the range of larger competitors, putting it in an awkward middle position. These cautionary tales show a clear pattern. When you stretch an aircraft too far beyond its original design, compromises pile up. You end up with a jet that's heavier, less efficient, and less flexible than airlines expect. Passengers may not notice, but airlines do, in their bottom line. For Airbus, this is the looming risk with the A220 stretch. They might please airlines in the short term, but if the new variant undermines the economics that made the A220 famous, it could turn into another case study of what went wrong. And worse, it could threaten the profitability of the A320neo, the aircraft that pays most of Airbus's bills today.
On the surface, the idea of stretching the A220 looks like a no-brainer. Airlines get more seats, lower cost per passenger, and a jet that could rival the 737 MAX and A320neo. Passengers would enjoy the same comfort that made the A220 so popular, while carriers could simplify fleets and expand into bigger markets. But dig deeper, and the trap becomes clear. Stretching the A220 risks compromising the very qualities that make it special. More weight could mean weaker performance. More seats could require expensive redesigns. And strategically, Airbus could end up competing against itself, undermining the A320neo, its most important cash cow. History has shown again and again that not every stretch works out. Some become legendary failures that cost manufacturers billions. For now, Airbus seems cautious, and perhaps wisely so. The A220 is a gem in its current form, and tampering with that formula may create more problems than solutions. The dream of an A220 stretch is tempting, but in aviation, not every dream should take flight. What do you think? Should Airbus take the risk and build a bigger A220, or leave it as is? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into aviation's biggest stories.